they called me a failure. Not once, not twice, but every single day for 20 years. You know that word? Failure. It doesn't just sit in your ears. It settles in your bones. It becomes the rhythm of your heartbeat. It becomes the voice you hear when you wake up at 3 a.m, staring at the ceiling, wondering if you'll ever be enough. I didn't fail a test. I didn't lose a job. I didn't crash a car. I failed them. My blood. My family. The people who were supposed to love me unconditionally, who were supposed to be my safe place, looked at me and saw a disappointment so profound that it echoed through every family dinner, every holiday, every phone call that ended with a sigh I wasn't supposed to hear but always did. 20 years, 7,300 days, and every single one of them carried the same weight, the same quiet judgment, the same unspoken verdict. You are not what we wanted. You are not what we expected. You are not enough. And for 2 decades, I believed them. I carried it like a stone in my chest. I let it shape the way I walked into rooms, the way I spoke, the way I apologized for existing. I built a life around the idea that if I just worked harder, loved louder, stayed quieter, maybe one day the word would stop following me. Maybe one day I'd earn the right to be called something else. Success, pride, enough. But it never came. Instead, it multiplied. It grew roots. It became the soil I tried to plant my life in, and nothing bloomed. Until her, until my daughter, and until him, the groom, the man who stood at the front of a room full of people who had spent 20 years, telling me I was broken, and in 3 minutes, he didn't just change the story. He erased it. He silenced the room with a truth so heavy, so undeniable, that the air itself seemed to hold its breath. And in that silence, I finally heard something I hadn't heard in 2 decades. Peace. But before we get to that moment, before we get to the wedding, before we get to the secret that turned 20 years of shame into a lifetime of vindication, you need to understand the weight. You need to understand what it's like to be the family disappointment. Not the dramatic kind. Not the kind that makes headlines. The quiet kind. The kind that shows up in the way your mother's smile doesn't reach her eyes when you walk into the room. The kind that lives in your father's posture. How he turns slightly away when you speak, as if your words are a burden he's trying not to carry. The kind that echoes in your siblings' tone when they say, well, at least you're happy. Like happiness is a consolation prize for not being successful. I learned early that failure isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the absence of applause. Sometimes it's the way a table goes quiet when you sit down. Sometimes it's the way a phone rings and you know it's them and your stomach drops. Before you even say hello, because you already know what's coming. Not anger, not yelling. Something worse. Disappointment. The quiet kind. The kind that wraps around your throat and tells you to shrink. To stop taking up space. To stop hoping. I was 22 when I realized I would never be the child they wanted. I remember the exact moment. It was a Sunday. The kind of Sunday that feels heavy with unspoken expectations. My mother had made roast. My father was reading the paper. My brother was talking about his promotion. And I was sitting there, hands folded in my lap, wearing the sweater I knew my mother liked, the one she bought me 3 years ago, because she said it made me look put together, even though I knew she was really saying I looked like I was trying too hard. My brother mentioned his new car. My mother smiled. My father nodded. Then someone asked what I was doing with my life. And I said quietly, honestly, that I was working part-time at a bookstore, that I was taking night classes, that I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do next. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full. Full of everything they weren't saying. Full of the word. Failure. My mother set down her fork. My father turned a page. My brother looked at his phone, and in that moment, I realized something that would take me 20 years to fully understand. I wasn't failing them. They were failing me, not by being cruel, not by being abusive, but by loving me conditionally, by tying my worth to my output, by measuring my value in degrees, in salaries, in milestones I hadn't hit. And when I didn't fit the mold, they didn't try to understand the shape I was becoming. They just called it wrong. I left that house that night with a duffel bag, a library card, and a quiet promise to myself. I will never again apologize for not being you. I will build a life that doesn't need your approval to breathe. And I did. It wasn't easy. It was messy. It was lonely. I worked jobs that didn't look good on resumes. I lived in apartments with peeling paint and radiators that hissed like old men breathing. I cried in grocery store parking lots because I couldn't afford the good coffee. I dated people who didn't stay. I lost friends who couldn't understand why I wouldn't just try harder, but I kept going. Not because I believed in myself, not yet, but because I refused to let their version of me be the only version that existed. And then she came. My daughter. I found out I was pregnant when I was 29, alone, scared, convinced I was repeating every mistake I'd ever made. I remember standing in a bathroom with a plastic stick in my hand, staring at the 2 pink lines, feeling the floor tilt beneath me. I wasn't ready. I didn't have a partner. I didn't have money. I didn't have a plan. All I had was the echo of 20 years of being called a failure, and the terrifying realization that now I was responsible for another life. I thought about calling my family. I thought about asking for help, but I already knew what they'd say. I already knew the sigh, the pause, the quiet judgment. So I didn't call. I bought a secondhand crib. I learned how to assemble it from a YouTube video with shaky hands and tear-blurred eyes. I worked double shifts. I slept in 4-hour increments. I learned how to be a mother by reading books in the laundromat, by watching how other parents held their babies in parks, by listening to podcasts while I folded tiny socks that felt impossibly fragile in my hands. And when she was born, when I finally held her, when she opened her eyes and looked up at me, something inside me cracked open. Not in pain, in surrender, in love, in recognition. Her eyes, they were mine, not the shape, not the color, but the way they held the world, the way they watched, the way they waited. I saw myself in her, the same quiet intensity, the same fear of not being enough, the same desperate hope that someone would finally see her. And in that moment I made another promise, not to my family, not to the world, to her. I will never let you grow up believing you are a disappointment. I will never measure your worth by someone else's ruler. I will never let the word failure touch you, not while I'm breathing. And I kept that promise. I raised her in a house that smelled like vanilla and old paperbacks. I taught her how to cook, how to budget, how to cry without shame, how to say no without guilt. I showed her that success isn't a title. It's a rhythm. It's the way you show up, the way you keep going, the way you love people even when they don't love you back. I didn't have much to give her, but I gave her everything I had. And she grew. Not into the child my family would have approved of. Not into a doctor, a lawyer, a CEO. She grew into an artist, into a woman who paints with her hands, who writes poetry on napkins, who finds beauty in cracked sidewalks and faded photographs, who doesn't apologize for taking up space, who looks at the world and sees color where others see gray. And I watched her become herself, not despite my failures, because of them, because I knew what it felt like to be told you're wrong for existing, so I made sure she never doubted her right to. But family doesn't disappear just because you walk away. They linger, in holiday cards that never come, in rumors passed through cousins, in the way your mother's name still makes your chest tighten, even after a decade. They linger in the quiet moments, in the way you catch yourself apologizing for existing in a room, in the way you still wait for approval that will never come. And when my daughter told me she was engaged, When she said his name, when she showed me the ring, my first thought wasn't joy, it was dread. Because I knew what was coming. I knew they would show up. I knew they would sit in the front row. I knew they would smile. I knew they would pretend nothing had changed. I knew they would look at me across the aisle and see the same woman they'd called a failure for 20 years. And I knew, deep in my bones, that I would spend the entire wedding holding my breath, waiting for the moment they decided to remind me why I didn't belong. I didn't want them there, but she did. And I've spent my whole life learning that love isn't about control. It's about letting go. So I said yes. I helped her plan. I booked the venue. I chose the flowers. I picked out a dress that fit like armor. And I prepared myself for the wait, for the eyes, for the silence, for the word. I didn't know it would be the last time I'd ever hear it. I didn't know that the man she was marrying would carry a secret so heavy, so precise, so perfectly timed, that it would unravel 2 decades of shame in a single breath. I didn't know that the groom, a man I'd only met 3 times, a quiet man with gentle hands and a voice that barely rose above a whisper, had been watching me for years. Not in a creepy way, in a reverent way, in the way you watch someone who's been carrying a mountain without ever asking for help. He knew things I didn't think anyone knew. He knew the nights I cried in the bathroom. He knew the jobs I took to keep us afloat. He knew the sacrifices I never talked about. He knew the way I loved her. And he knew, with absolute certainty, that I had never been a failure. Not once. Not ever. But I didn't know any of that yet. All I knew was that the wedding was coming, and I was terrified, not of the ceremony, not of the guests, not of the vows. I was terrified of being seen, of sitting in a room full of people who had spent 20 years telling me I wasn't enough and having to smile while they pretended I was. I practiced my smile in the mirror. I rehearsed my posture. I told myself it didn't matter, that I was stronger now, that I didn't need their approval, that I had built a life they couldn't touch. But the truth is, you don't just walk away from 20 years of conditioning. You carry it in your shoulders, in your voice, in the way you flinch when someone says your name too sharply. I carried it into the wedding day. I carried it down the aisle. I carried it into the front row, where I sat between my brother and my mother, feeling the space between us like a frozen river. I didn't look at her. I looked at the program. I looked at my hands. I looked at my daughter, radiant in white, laughing with her friends, completely unaware of the storm sitting 3 feet away from her. And then the ceremony began. The music played. The words were spoken. The rings were exchanged. And then it was time for the speeches. I braced myself. I expected the usual, the polite praise, the vague blessings, the quiet dismissal. What I didn't expect was him, the groom. He stood up. He adjusted the microphone. He looked out at the room, and then he looked at me. Not with pity. Not with sympathy. With recognition. And he said, "Before I say anything about my bride, I need to say something about her mother." The room went still. I felt my mother shift beside me. I felt my brother tense. I felt my own breath catch. He didn't smile. He didn't soften his voice. He spoke like a man delivering a verdict he'd been carrying for years. 20 years ago, he began, a woman was told she was a failure, not because she didn't try, not because she didn't care, but because she didn't fit into a box that was never hers to begin with. She was told she was falling behind. She was told she wasn't measuring up. She was told she would never be enough. And for 20 years she believed them. She worked jobs that broke her back. She lived in places that broke her spirit. She raised a child alone. She cried in silence. She apologized for existing. She carried the weight of their disappointment like it was her fault. But here's the secret they never saw. Here's the truth they refused to acknowledge. While they were measuring her by their standards, she was building a life that didn't need them. While they were calling her a failure, she was becoming the kind of mother that saves lives. While they were waiting for her to break, she was learning how to bend without snapping, and she never once asked for help. Not because she didn't need it, but because she knew, deep down, that if she asked, they would only confirm what they'd already decided, that she wasn't enough. The room was so quiet I could hear the hum of the lights. I couldn't breathe. My hands were shaking. My mother was staring at the floor. My brother was gripping his glass like it was the only thing holding him together. The groom didn't stop. I didn't meet her mother until 3 years ago, but I've known her story longer than that. Because I know what it looks like when someone loves you without conditions, when someone shows up even when no one claps, when someone chooses you over pride. And I know, without a single doubt, that the woman sitting in that chair is not a failure. She is the reason my fiancé knows how to stand tall. She is the reason my fiancé knows how to love fiercely. She is the reason my fiancé knows how to walk away from people who don't see her worth. And if you want to talk about success, if you want to talk about legacy, if you want to talk about the kind of life that actually matters, then you don't look at resumes, you don't look at bank accounts, you don't look at titles, you look at the child she raised. You look at the woman she became. You look at the silence she survived. And you realize that failure was never hers to carry. It was theirs to give. And today, I'm giving it back. He sat down. The room didn't applaud. Not at first. It couldn't. The silence wasn't empty. It was heavy. It was full of 20 years of unspoken apologies, of unacknowledged sacrifices, of unreturned love. And in that silence, I felt something I hadn't felt in 2 decades. The weight lifted. Not all at once, but enough. Enough to breathe, enough to cry, enough to finally stop apologizing for existing. My mother didn't look at me. My brother didn't speak. But it didn't matter. The verdict was over. The trial was done. And for the first time in 20 years, I wasn't the one on the stand. I was the one who survived. And survival, I realized, isn't a consolation prize. It's a victory. It's the quiet triumph of choosing yourself when everyone else told you to shrink. It's the courage to keep going when the world says you've already lost. It's the refusal to let someone else's definition of failure become your identity. And as I sat there, tears falling freely, no longer hiding them, no longer ashamed of them, I understood something I'd been running from my whole life. The people who called me a failure weren't judging me. They were judging themselves. They were projecting their own fears, their own unmet expectations, their own inability to love without conditions. And I spent 20 years carrying their guilt, as if it were mine, but it was never mine to carry. It was theirs to release. And they never did. So I did. Not with anger, not with revenge, with peace, with the quiet certainty that I had already won, that I had already built a life that mattered, that I had already loved someone enough to teach them how to love themselves. And that, in the end, is the only success that doesn't fade. The groom's words didn't just silence the room. They rewired my nervous system. They untangled the knots in my chest. They gave my daughter the one thing I'd been trying to give her my whole life, proof that she came from strength. Not despite my struggles, because of them. And as the reception began, as the music played, as people finally started to clap, to cry, to hug, to speak, I didn't feel the need to explain myself. I didn't feel the need to defend my past. I just sat, I watched, I breathed, and I finally let myself be seen. Not as a failure, not as a disappointment, not as a cautionary tale, but as a woman who survived, who loved, who built, who endured, who chose her child over their approval, who chose peace over pride, who chose truth over silence. And in that choice, I found everything I'd been searching for, not in their eyes, in my own. You know what's funny about failure? It's only real if you believe it. It only has power if you let it. It only echoes if you keep repeating it. I spent 20 years repeating it, letting it shape my choices, letting it dictate my worth, letting it convince me that I was broken. But I wasn't broken. I was becoming. And becoming doesn't look like a straight line. It looks like detours, like wrong turns, like starting over, like crying in parking lots, like working double shifts, like loving someone who doesn't love you back, like choosing to keep going when every logical reason says to quit. That's not failure. That's faith. Faith in yourself, faith in the process, faith that one day someone will see what you've been carrying. And when they do, when the truth finally breaks through the noise, it doesn't just change how others see you. It changes how you see yourself. I used to think success was a destination, a place you arrive at, a title you earn, a moment when everyone finally claps. But success isn't a place. It's a practice. It's showing up. It's trying again. It's loving anyway. It's raising a child who knows her worth. It's walking away from people who don't. It's speaking your truth even when your voice shakes. It's refusing to let someone else's story become yours. And I've done all of that. Not perfectly, not gracefully, but persistently. And persistence, I've learned, is the quietest form of courage. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't demand attention. It just keeps going. While the world says stop, while the family says shrink, while the past says you're not enough, you keep going. And one day, you look back, and you realize you've already won. Not because they finally see you, but because you finally see yourself. And when you do, when the mirror stops reflecting their words and starts reflecting your truth, something shifts. The shoulders drop. The breath deepens. The heart opens. And you realize you were never the problem. You were the solution. You were the one who stayed, who loved, who built, who endured, who chose her child over their approval, who chose peace over pride, who chose truth over silence. And that's not failure. That's legacy. That's the kind of life that outlasts judgment, that outlives disappointment, that outshines the need for approval. And as I sit here now writing this, remembering that day, remembering his voice, remembering the silence, remembering the tears, I don't feel anger. I don't feel bitterness. I feel gratitude. Gratitude for the struggle. Gratitude for the loneliness. Gratitude for the nights I thought I wouldn't make it. Gratitude for the mornings I woke up anyway. Gratitude for the daughter who taught me how to love myself. Gratitude for the groom who spoke the truth when no one else would. Gratitude for the 20 years that taught me how to survive. Because survival isn't the end of the story. It's the beginning. It's the foundation. It's the soil where everything else grows. And I've grown. Not into the person they wanted. Into the person I needed to be. Stronger. Softer. Clearer. Freer. And if you're listening to this right now, if you've ever been called a failure, if you've ever carried someone else's disappointment as your own, if you've ever sat in a room and felt like you didn't belong, I need you to hear this. You are not what they say you are. You are what you do. You are what you keep choosing. You are the love you give when no one gives it back. You are the mornings you wake up anyway. You are the tears you don't hide. You are the boundaries you finally set. You are the life you build when they say you can't. And one day, someone will see it. Not because you prove it, because you live it. And when they do, when the truth finally breaks through, it won't just silence the room. It will set you free. Free from their words. Free from their expectations. Free from the need to prove yourself to people who never intended to see you. And in that freedom, you'll finally hear the only voice that ever mattered. Your own. And it will tell you what I finally heard. That you were never a failure. You were just becoming. And becoming takes time. It takes courage. It takes pain. It takes love. It takes 20 years of carrying a weight that was never yours. But it also takes one moment, one voice, one truth, one silence that finally speaks. And when it does, you'll realize you were never falling behind. You were just walking your own path. And your path, no matter how crooked, no matter how quiet, no matter how unapproved, was always enough. It always will be. So keep going. Keep loving. Keep choosing yourself. Keep raising your children in truth. Keep walking away from what drains you. Keep speaking up when your voice shakes. Keep crying when you need to. Keep smiling when it's hard. Keep building. Keep surviving. Keep becoming. Because one day, the room will go quiet. The words will stop. The weight will lift. And you'll finally hear it. The truth. The silence. The peace. The end of the story they wrote. The beginning of the one you live. And it will be enough. More than enough. It will be everything. I used to think my life was defined by what I didn't have. The approval, the recognition, the easy path, the clean narrative. But life isn't clean. It's messy, it's loud, it's quiet, it's broken, it's beautiful. And mine, with all its detours, all its struggles, all its silent victories, is exactly what it needed to be. Not for them, for me, for her, for the woman I became. And if you're carrying a weight right now, if you're hearing their words in your head, if you're wondering if you'll ever be enough, I need you to do one thing. Breathe. Just breathe. In. Out. Feel the air. Feel your chest rise. Feel your heart beat. That's proof. Proof that you're still here. Proof that you haven't given up. Proof that you're still fighting. And fighting, even quietly, even invisibly, even without applause, is enough. It always has been. It always will be. The groom didn't just speak at a wedding. He spoke for every person who's ever been told they're falling short, for every parent who's raised a child alone, for every worker who's taken the job no one wanted, for every artist who's been called impractical, for every dreamer who's been called naive, for every quiet soul who's been told to speak up louder, to stand taller, to try harder, to be more. He spoke for them. And in doing so, he gave me back my name. Not the one they called me, the one I earned, the one I lived, the one I chose. And I'll wear it forever, not with pride, with peace. Because peace isn't the absence of struggle. It's the presence of truth. And the truth is this: I was never a failure. I was just waiting for the world to catch up. And when it finally did, when the room went quiet, when the words stopped, when the weight lifted, I didn't feel vindicated. I felt whole. And wholeness isn't something you earn. It's something you remember. Remember who you are. Remember what you've survived. Remember the love you've given. Remember the life you've built. Remember the child you've raised. Remember the mornings you've faced. Remember the nights you've endured. Remember the silence you've carried. Remember the truth you've spoken. Remember yourself. And when you do, when you finally look in the mirror and see not their words but your worth, you'll understand. You were never failing. You were becoming. And becoming is the bravest thing a human can do. So keep going. Keep choosing. Keep loving. Keep surviving. Keep becoming. Because one day the room will go quiet, the truth will speak, the weight will lift, and you'll finally hear it. The silence, the peace, the end, the beginning, the truth. You were never a failure. You were just waiting to be seen. And now you are. And that's enough, more than enough, it's everything. Do subscribe.